Thank you, Ms. Hudson. It is our pleasure to be here this evening and assist the education board with the interview process. The process of the board is, the purpose of the forum is to give you an opportunity to provide feedback on the education board's candidates for the superintendent director of education. The three candidates have completed 2 regular second interviews to this point, and they've also completed 3 performance tasks or assessments, which included presentations and a written task. Tonight is considered the 3rd round of interviews, which is the public forums. Before this, the staff forum was held, and now this is open to the public. The education board is seeking your feedback before making the final hiring decision. And at the end of the forum this evening, you will be asked to anonymously submit your feedback using a QR code. We also have those posted around the room. There's some in the hallways with computers set up also to help you with that. And hopefully when you enter, you also received one as a handout. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the tribal HR staff that are here this evening to assist you during the forum. HR staff, could you please raise your hands? So if you have any questions or need assistance, they are here to assist as well. Each candidate was asked to prepare a 10-minute presentation to introduce themselves to you. We're going to begin by having the candidates present in alphabetical order. Derek Gay, followed by Victoria Corlett, then Serena Sadio. We will begin with Derek Gay.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for taking some time out of your evenings to come and hear about us candidates. Just wanted to jump right into it. Again, welcome. My name is Derek Begay. I'm originally from Gallup, New Mexico. I am a member of the Navajo Nation. My clans are Kian, son of the Westchin, Chief Westchin, Kian, Westchin. Again, I grew up in Gallup, New Mexico. Currently work in Monument Valley, Utah, the San Jose District. That's Southern Utah. I'm an assistant superintendent. I oversee 6 of our 12 schools within the district. A little bit about my background. Again, my education up there. I most recently finished my doctorate in education. I wrote my dissertation regarding barriers of Indigenous students to be successful in our academic systems, and I talked with community members, principals, teachers to identify what those areas are. And it's a passion for me enough to, 1, be in education, but 2, for have my dissertation focused on. Throughout my career, I worked as an education technician or a teaching assistant in the classroom, working my way to be a teacher, an instructional coach. I also was in charge of a grant with the U.S. Department of Ed. I then was an international baccalaureate coordinator with a school in Mexico. And then I also had positions as an assistant principal and now assistant superintendent. So working my way throughout the education system, kind of identified areas that I needed to grow in, and that's led me to my path here. And again, I'm just welcome for the opportunity, but also to give you a little bit of insight on who I am. My philosophy of education really focuses on main point, education being attainable for all of our students, all of our kids. And that path could look a lot different for each student, but identifying that. For example, they went through college and career, which is kind of the streamlined pathway, but also focusing on trade schools, individuals want to go into welding or hospitality or whatever pathway that they have to be successful, to get on a job, be a mechanic. And then also looking at military, and then also those who go straight into the workforce. So making sure that pathway is identified for all of our students, and making sure that they're having the right tools to be successful. Again, having that support, talking about those different areas of success that not all students are kind of geared towards that college education. So just making them aware of that, and that there are other options and that they can be successful. Again, really looking at infusing culture within our teaching as well, empowering staff, empowering students, and working so that we can be better for not only them, but for ourselves as well, and really having that sustainability. one of the things that I like to focus on too is different goals to have for the schools, and that can go a number of different ways. But again, getting stakeholder feedback for what those goals are is very important to me. So kind of hearing what the needs are of the community, parents, students as well, but also the staff. And then again, various members of that system that are in the school as well too. So identifying what those goals are kind of a holistic approach so that we can all, holding each other accountable, but also be aware that, we have a lot of work to be done so that our students can reap the success of that accountability, whether it starts at the school or at home, or that transition for learning at the school as well, and then also at the home, so that we're maintaining cultural awareness and language, and making sure that students at home continue to do their homework and those other things that are beneficial for them. So that's kind of my outlook on what the goals would be, looking at data, making sure that we have those goals put together as one so that we can move forward and making sure that we're accountable for our students that have attended this. In addition to that, there's various as far as the entry plan, and that's just looking at the alignment. What is our data state? Where our students at? And using all that information to formulate what our plan of action. To me, it's important that we have students who are, successful. Again, I talked about the different paths that there are, so that requires different pathways that they would be set in line for, whether they in school or high school, and really identifying, how we can best support them and what would be most beneficial to their learning in that area. In addition to that, I've talked a lot about proficiency as far as, showing that we're making growth. Again, we could be making a lot of growth as far as, reading, writing, mathematics, and those various areas, but showing proficiency is a little bit, that's really going to set us up for what students will be capable of doing, what skills that they have to be successful. Often growth looks like we start at a certain point, everyone can grow, and that's great. We want that, and we want to encourage that. Proficiency will really show the success that they have outside of the school, and then would be a skill that they could have for a job or for maintaining employment. Those different avenues are all encompassing, but all different as well too. Next, there was why I think I would be a best candidate for this position. Again, I have a lot of experience. I talked a little bit about that in my transition through the entire school system. But I think also my experience in my current position allows me to identify a way to empower other people. So I talked a little bit about getting teachers to be, counselors or principals. They could have more of an impact on students and family members, and then they would be successful in other avenues. But I think those are ways to make sure that our staff here are bringing themselves in positions that they maybe not want, but would be needed for so that they can make an impact with our students. And I think that's a way to kind of grow our own community as well. And by community, there could be employees who are working here, but also those who are within our system that we can make successful as well. In addition to that, again, I talked a little bit about my dissertation on, what the focus was, and it's a passion to make sure that all Indigenous students are successful and that they can, speak their language, be identified on who they are, and I always talk about walking in two different worlds. So making sure that they're successful in both, and that we have that mindset that knowing our language and culture is not a barrier or a deficit. It's an addition to who we are and what we are and what we're trying to achieve. And the fact that we can do that with going through the educational system is also important. So that kind of the knowledge that I would hope that comes out from the different programs that we put in place, but also working that through the cultural awareness piece, and making sure that we're blending those two different models, but also highlighting the uniqueness of the culture that we would have in the language as well, so that we're supporting and sustaining that. In addition, I talked a little bit about looking at how we teach our languages and how that needs to be modified, but really relying on the community, the elders, those fluent speakers, to be the learner, or the teachers of that model, and how can we incorporate that in the school system and be vital to its longevity. and that's making sure that's an existence all right here. Again, with my own language, I have a big vocabulary, but can't put sentences together. So looking at, how we look at teaching is one of the unique things that I would make sure that we would have so that we're kind of meeting that need for our students and again, also for the community and with the community's help as well. And then lastly, just a little bit about myself. It's the things I like to do on my free time. And make it more personal. So kind of what I like to do and who I am. But I have a picture of one guy in the background that's currently where I live right now. So I get to kind of go hiking in the back there. When I can, when I try to run, same thing with reading, those two things that like I have to make time, real time to do those. But also like watching sports, trying new foods, and then traveling and spending time with my family. But to me, those all fit into what my philosophy of education is, the differences that I've been able to complete within my journey so far. And look forward to meeting you and talking with you more tonight and your questions as well. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray, for that.
Yeah, good evening and thank you for having me tonight. My name is Dr. Vicki Booker. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about my background. Very quickly, I was born and raised in California. I moved out to Arizona from Williamsburg, Virginia in 2013. I currently live in Gilbert, Arizona, and I'm actually a mother, a wife, and a grandmother because I do have a grandchild. And all of my kids are contemporary adult children. But the more importantly, I want to share my background in education. I have a double major in business as well as elementary education, K through 8, from Gonzaga. They were a basketball team now, but they weren't when I went there. Master's degree in special education from Northwestern University in Louisiana. So my master's was focused on doing disabilities and identifying mild and moderate disabilities, providing interventions for them. And then I completed my school administration endorsement as well as part of my doctorate at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. And then I finished it at PhD when I moved out here. My background, I started out as a teacher in a segregated school in Leesville, Louisiana. That was my first teaching job as a 6th grade teacher. Then I moved out to Virginia, and that's where the biggest part of my career is. For 18 years, I started out as a special education teacher. Then I worked as a math teacher. I was a middle school teacher of the year at that time. And then I moved into the administration track and started as an assessment and compliance coordinator. That job, I oversaw data as well as oversaw 504s, put interventions in place, as well as oversaw attendance for students that weren't attending school. So putting contracts in place, putting interventions in place to help get kids to school at a high school level. Then from there, I took an assistant principal job, and then at a high school as well as a middle school. And then I went to the district level, and there I was a special education instructional specialist, where I had the opportunity to provide special education support at a variety of schools within the big school division, and open up self-contained classes, as well as work on the curriculum that helped teachers provide that instruction. Then I went on to be a high school principal after that, of a high school that was diverse in nature. It was 80% African American and 20% Caucasian. So moving from there, we moved out here to Salt River. I actually moved out to Arizona, and I was the principal for Salt River High School when I moved out here in 2013. After being the principal of the high school, then I moved on to be the director of student support services here in Salt River Schools, where we created the wraparound service supports that you see now. That includes your behavior interventionists that we use at the elementary. We also brought behavioral health to the schools, so kids could get counseling while they were in the school. We also started looking at resources on intervention. So social service facilitators, school community relations, how they could support families and meet families where they're at. And so, because kids cannot learn in a school if they are not feeling safe And the kids at that time were going through a lot of social and emotional things. Then from there, I moved on to be the acting education director / superintendent for Salt River Schools. At that time, we were coming out of COVID, and so we were helping kids transition back into schools, going through the vaccine mandate for the community, as well as just helping kids feel safe about going back to school as well as families. So it included a lot of communication with the community and to be very hands-on with the community because they were changing times. And so we had to make a lot of changes at that time. Then after that, I'm currently at, I'm the Fort McDowell Education Director / Superintendent. I oversee the Cultures Department, as well as the Travel Library, as well as the Education Department at Fort McDowell, which is right up the road. And I have the ability to learn a lot about the culture and how the language is kind of going away and utilize it, as well as doing supports as outside school, because the majority of the supports for Fort McDowell kids are in the outside district. My vision or what I value. My goal is to oversee an education division that is about academic excellence, but at the same time, supports and services. As I said earlier, kids cannot be successful without the right support. And also embedding our culture within it. One thing I learned more, I was here for 10 years. I'm going up to Fort McDowell. I learned a lot about the language and culture while I was here, but not as much as I thought I would. After I started overseeing the culture department, I realized the importance of the language. I learned the history of the language. I learned that there's multiple dialects to a language. I learned a variety of things. We were able to create a language app for children to learn the language. We were able to now do a summer youth program that the kids learn about their culture for an entire week before we do other activities. Where we learn about creating a kitchen and cooking, all the different aspects, creating a ribbon skirt, all different things that I took for granted before. Then I wanted to know that what I really value is kids and families. That's why everybody in education, that's why we're here. To make kids and families successful. Families successful, but their kids are successful. Then also, one size does not fit all. We have to have a variety of options. We can't just have the classroom setting. We might need a virtual hub. What not everybody can attend one way. So we have to offer different options, whether it's at the kindergarten level all the way to the high school level. Strong communication. The community deserves to know what is going on in the schools, and the people inside the school deserve to know what's going on. We need to be transparent about our communication and our expectations, so they're clear with everybody. And then lastly, it's important to understand the community in which you work. What's important to the community, what you are wanting, your input, and the tradition, the different departments, understanding all the different workings of it. Lastly, going on to the current mission, I highlighted some of the important things that are in the current mission for Salt River Schools that I just highlighted to you. It's important to have a partnership with the community. It's important to have strong academics. It's important to have a safe learning environment because if kids don't feel safe, they won't learn. It's important to understand the cultural aspects and embed them in what we learn, which is the Ottoman Peaposh. And it's also important to meet kids where they're at. Not everybody comes at the same level. Lastly, moving on to my goals. I have 5 goals for Salt River School. The first one, to increase communication and collaboration, both with the community and as well as in the schools. The second one is to expand the language opportunities for students both within Salt River Schools and Mesa. We have the opportunity to certify some of our elders in the language and to offer a foreign language to some of the outside schools. The local districts are starting these and are being very successful, and they're models that we can borrow and use. Focus efforts on building blocks of the Salt River Schools. We need to focus on EC in the elementary, build those strong academic blocks so that when we want to bring a school on in the future, we're building strong blocks to get there. The next thing we want to do is increase options and choices. Going to a regular school doesn't fit for everybody. Going to a virtual hub might. We also have an ALA, but we need to have a variety of options. We also need to provide supports in our outside schools. We have 1,000 kids in the house surrounding schools, not just here in Salt River schools. We need to provide supports within those schools, which includes academic strategy teacher, where I currently am now. I have teachers placed in the outside schools to support the kids have a go-to person. We can also track progress. We can also add additional support for them. And then lastly, continue to assess our supports with the wraparound and the social and emotional. Ever since COVID and even before COVID, social and emotional, the person is more important than the actual grade. We need to make sure how our kids are, how they're feeling, how they approach things, so they're comfortable with learning. Because if you're not in the right space, you can't get there. And then lastly, I wanted to share with you the why me. I'm passionate about this community. I obviously worked here for 10 years, and that's why I'm coming back. I just love what the community is all about. Kids and families first mentality, as well as strong advocates, strong communicator, and listener. And then I shared so many other components already with you today. And then lastly, I wanted to end with, that's the reason I'm here. This is my family, but I also see Salt River as a family. We may not all be perfect. We may not do it the right way, but we're always together. So I wanted to end with that note. Thank you, and I look forward to taking the question.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Yo soy Mañado, we got Mr. Deseado, Pia, Ito Negenes, Ito Macabago. Community, two on the road to walk here. We're proud to be their communication director. As I mentioned, I bring all of this information and continuing the services and to our community members, and so it makes me really proud as a first generation college student to be able to operate those programs for our community and service the needs that we have. After graduating high school, I moved to New York City. I wasn't quite sure what it is that I wanted to study, so I decided to study the way that people think. I studied philosophy, studies, and business studies, and decided to stay in New York a little bit longer and join the New York City Teaching Fellows, which is essentially like Teach for America, but specific to New York City. Got a master's at Long Island University. For folks, I started teaching in 2008 in Brooklyn. Spent a couple of years in Brooklyn and moved on over to Bronx, the poorest neighborhoods in the country to work with middle school students at that level. And then eventually, if you've ever been to New York City, you know, you kind of age out. And so I aged out of the subway system and Los Angeles, and joined the Los Angeles public school system over there. System this time is very true. And middle school students rather than high school and middle school students, which is what I focus on in Brooklyn and Bronx. During that time, you know, increasing levels of responsibility, not just in the classroom, but then outside as a professional administrator for one of the elementary schools and stuff. Now, for the past 5 years, I've been the education director for the Hospital Outreach Tribe, which is a great resource for the community. We operate 10 different programs under the federal, state, and tribal dollars that we're blessed with to serve our communities. And some of that includes Head Start, scholarship application programs, chartered operated school system, and various other services which we consider the critical grade type operation with the tribe. So a little bit about what I believe about education. I have a strong social justice background. I'm a supporter and a believer in the work of Paulo Freire. And so I believe that education should be a tool for liberation. I can tell you right now that I don't think that anymore. It tends to be site for reproduction. This is an industrial era, industrial revolution era tool, and so we've continued on this pathway of turning out workers and people who fit within the system. And I can tell you that Native American students need something different, right? They need to reconceptualize the education system in service of our students based on a strong cultural platform. And so Oftentimes what schools do is they come in communities and they plant what's already happening there, the culture, the history, the language in favor of standards and technical systems that don't speak to the lived realities and experiences of our students, and they don't address the baseline needs of our students. And so I think this school should focus on working healing, self-discovery, critical thinking and question, and really focus on the social emotional aspect of what it means to be a student, because we can't have academically ready students that can succeed in achieving outcomes unless they're whole people. And so moving towards figuring out how to develop whole people. So the scholarship of Dr. Tamiri White-Cutie is really important. It informs a lot of the way that I think about this. Her scholarship is primarily in mental health. But if you think about where we are as a country, where we are in our educational systems, the status of teaching and learning in our country, and the experiences that our students are having, we are in it. Teachers are leaving the field in droves because we're managing so much stress. Bandwidth is stretched beyond imagination. We're not able to handle behavior and things that are happening in the classroom. And the solution for that tends to be, well, have you tried this rubric? Have you tried this technical skill that doesn't address the behaviors? And part of what Dr. White-Cutie looks at is what contributes to positive outcomes for people who ask. And we're able to group that into 3 different areas, which is the Western treatment and intervention. That's the schooling that we've received, the operationalized, the therapeutic alliance, which is essentially for us would be teachers and then the big piece, lo and behold, what matters most to people and being able to achieve outcomes is the character and culture that they have. That's something that the team. And we spend a lot of time focusing on that 5% of Western intervention and treatment. We spend all of our academic years learning how to visualize and how to do those things. And then we come into the classroom and we can't build up the baseline needs for our students. And so I think it's really important that we begin to shift and reconceptualize schools, particularly for a Asian country, and understanding that our traditional ways of knowing and meet the needs of our community members, right? There's this technical framework, something like RTI, right, which says that 80 to 90% of your students are going to get their needs met in the classroom to be able to achieve the outcomes. But what does the data say about Native American students? 80% of our students are minimally proficient in ELA and math. And it's been that way for as long as we've been collecting data on Native American student performances. So again, reflected in the pieces of information, or that 5% is not the end all be all for students. If you think about something like the man in the maze, right? This is a traditional way of thinking. This is a traditional way of knowing, and it reflects all of the adaptive features that you need to be building the university. The man in the maze has a journey. He has a set of habits that he has to be successful. He has to challenge his feelings and understanding to navigate the world around him. He has to be able to tolerate discomfort to come to a place of wholeness. This is not what we instruct. Okay, our culture, our language, our history has value that is unquantifiable to our students. The fact that they do not have access to it daily, regularly, and people who are well trained and understand their own language and culture is the factor for why we're seeing 80% of our students in proficient in ELA and math. And so I think it's time, as we reconceptualize schools, for us to think about putting some of those technical pieces. The district and the tribe have done great work empowering you with the tools to operationalize those technical matters. But we also need to focus on the fact that we are in crisis right now. We need to enter crisis response testing, focusing on restorative justice, transformative justice to help us be whole selves. And build the organizational culture of our schools and our. That means we need to look at how we can expand and deepen supportive services, not just for students, but for teachers as well. Our teachers need to be well for our students to be well. How are we taking care? And then finally, that language and culture. You know, as a Yaqui person who knows that fewer than 1% of our enrolled membership speaking their language, I understand that it's urgent that we respond to this crisis, and that the only way for us to do this is to increase and demonstrate acquisition of language fluency within our school system. And so part of what that looks like, and I'll just start at the bottom here, is developing pathways for teachers and staff to become fluent in Optimum English that doesn't take them outside of their regular school days because we're tired at the end of the day. We don't have a lot of bandwidth to do those things. So how do we create training programs that are built into the teacher's school day, that are built into the teacher's professional development, so that they can be fluent in their language and culture and instruct in that way? I'm transitioning into the position. I also want to make sure that you all understand that I believe that listening is a form of communication. I'll be doing listening interviews with all of the different stakeholders to understand what the issues are. I'm not in a position to come in and tell you what works for you, but I am in a position to hear your ideas and operationalize them in a way that supports the vision that you all have for your community. And part of that is being able to hold community building sessions, all of the different stakeholders, not just for listening interviews, but the action sessions where we get to the deep discussions about what it is that we want to see for our community, and really truly using the sovereignty and the self-determination that we have to be able to make radical changes in our schools and our communities. And so then we can start creating strategic plans and looking at how we're going to get all of those things. But only then are we able to do that. And I want to make clear and elaborate for you one more time. The social emotional piece of this, the transformative justice piece, the restorative justice piece that allows us to build the character and the culture where students is the most important piece that schools have to figure out how to adjust and implement in their day-to-day to make it sustainable for students and make it sustainable for teachers and to revitalize the language and culture of the groups. Thank you.
Candidates to come on stage. Raise the screen and start asking some. Raise the screen. Started. We're going to begin by asking questions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to the question. Each candidate will respond to the same question in a rotating order. Questions submitted in advance through the surveys that were submitted will be asked to the candidates. In addition, if you would like to ask candidate questions, we invite you to come to one of the two microphones up front, and we can bring them to you here in the aisles. We'll be rotating the questions from the audience and those in advance, and it does include basic questions. We do ask that you raise your question. It's something that can be asked of all candidates, not specific to one candidate. So we encourage you all to do that. We're going to start with a question from the survey. And the order of this question will be the Victoria Perlet. Second will be Serena Rosario, and then Derek Begay. The question from the survey: describe your leadership style. Do you believe micromanaging people is an effective way of leading? Please explain.
Thank you for the question. My leadership style is one of collaboration, but one of very clear expectations with accountability. I think you can achieve accountability by making sure your expectations are clear, making sure you communicate what those are, and following up with them. Some people can perceive that as micromanagement, but there is a piece of micromanagement that does have to, because we have an accountability, we have to follow through and make sure things are getting done. And sometimes micromanaging, you need a piece of both. You need a balance of both. You don't need all micromanagement, but you need a piece of it in order to make sure that the accountability occurs. And accountability can happen with a leadership style where you're in person, you're visible, and knowing what's going on in all the schools and all the areas. So you can hold that accountable. But my leadership style is very collaborative with input both from the community as well as staff. And then moving on to making sure that they follow through with what we put in place. Because I think that's one thing that we have concerns that sometimes we start things, but we don't finish them. So following through what we start.
Thank you. I like to think of myself as I want to make sure that, as a superintendent, you have to be the face of the school system, but that, you bring people alongside you in your activity, you really rely on supervisors, managers to be able to, reach across the aisle, support each other, collaborate with each other, building, moving people out of silos so that we can better coordinate our services, because at the end of the day, that's what the community center. This is part of the way that we do this by being in a lot of communication with each other. You know, when we develop the strategic plan, also we have annual quarterly benchmarks that are attached to those, and those will guide the conversation. Managers and staff level levels. And then, you know, to the question of micromanaging, always like to ask my leaders how they like to deal with it. How do they want me to have conversations? How frequently do they want to have conversations with me? And then use that model initially to work with them so that they can demonstrate to me that that is the appropriate level of support. Only when there are issues that need to be addressed do I begin to. Micromanagement is leadership. Is effective for getting outcomes from people who are struggling, and I don't do that until I have to.
Okay, my leadership style revolves around empowerment. Again, I like to make sure that staff, especially those who are the quietest in the room, share their opinions and their feedback. I think it's important to get all everyone's information and everyone's input in making decisions, but it also helps with understanding that we're all on board and on the same. In addition to the empowerment of staff, the other part I'd like to be is making sure that we're all transparent, so that everyone knows what's going on. Again, that transparency is important for learning everything that we have and making sure that everyone's on the same page, but making sure we also have the ownership to move forward on different things that we have to decide when it comes to dilemmas, when we have tough situations to make that we're doing. And again, to limit any micromanagement is to have clear expectations and accountability. So with clear expectations, you can diverge away from micromanaging anyone. If people know what to do, when to do, how to do, why to do, that information is going to help them to be successful in their job, but also to help them be successful in being a team player and working together. So again, want to limit micromanaging altogether, and by doing that, as a clear expectation.
Thank you. Do you have any questions from the audience?
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Celia, and I serve as the early global advisor on your scholarship program. So I feel like my question kind of figured to ask on the accountability piece. So how do you respond to criticism and feedback, especially when it pertains to your decisions you made or not made? And then the second part of that question, can you please share an example of how you apply this feedback constructively, or how do you ensure how do you put yourself together?
And the order for this question is Presidio, Begay, Corlett.
I do want to ask you to come to the microphone again. If other people.
How do you respond to criticism and feedback, especially when it pertains to your leadership style or decisions you made or not?
Directly, that's what I respond to. I don't let bad energy live in the corners of people's minds or anywhere that it doesn't serve them. And so if there is criticism, I do be challenged to see it as something difficult conversation with folks that that's where conflict.
again, responding to criticism is welcome. I think we're not perfect in any aspect of what we do. When we take on new positions, when we're new to something, we have that learning curve that we all take on, whether it's position as a superintendent, position as a teacher, a counselor, we all have that learning gap that we have. And so making sure that we address those concerns or hearing that feedback is crucial to be successful. I always say that if I don't know, I admit that I don't know, or if I have a question that I don't understand, that way I can get clarity and get feedback. And that's just a rule 101 with coaching, instructional, whether it's in the classroom or in an administrative position. So having that aspect and making sure that that's clarity and welcome, but also having an environment that's safe for staff to come to you and say, I don't know what you said, or I don't understand this task. Can you come to me and explain it to me? Welcome that. That's how, I've gone through things, and by asking these questions helps me to be successful in what I'm doing on what the task is, and not lingering on, oh, I don't know what they said, so I'm going to hold off and wait and wait and wait, and when the deadline comes, then I'm asking for help. So again, just making sure that that's transparent and welcoming in that environment. And then also repeat, in any position, I have many instances where I have that feedback that I'm taking, whether I'm writing a grant, so I have to kind of be on my toes to get who am I identifying to be successful and who am I identifying to be a team member for working on specific projects so that we can be successful. Because ultimately it's the students at stake who would fail if we don't have that information.
Thank you for the question. I take criticism head on, very similar to the other two. I think everybody in this room, we're all humans, we all make mistakes. We can all learn from each other. Everybody in this room has strengths, everybody has weaknesses. And I think it's important for people to call things out. And it also goes back to relationship. If you have a relationship and you've opened your door and have that type of communication, people will feel comfortable coming to you to say, that doesn't look right, or what do you think about this? That allows you to take that information, because being in a leadership position, we are not the only voice. We have to make hard decisions, yes, but we have to hear all the voices too. And you have to be open to it. So that means being open to criticism. That means being open to, sometimes we might not make the best decisions, but being able to sit down with staff and provide feedback to say, this is why I made the decision. This is the why. Sometimes it's very important to just say, this is why we're making this decision. While it takes longer to explain, I think it's important for people to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And you mentioned also in your question about feedback. I think it's really important that if there's a concern that's out there, that you sit one-on-one or you sit as the group and get the feedback. We have a conversation. It's about relationships. It's about actually being a good listener. Sometimes you just need to listen and then figure out a plan from there or address the situation. But half the battle is just listening. And I think listening to what people have to say and then taking that internally and making decisions moving forward.
Thank you. The next question is from the survey. How would you revamp the ALA school day to ensure students are actively reading lessons versus students learning on computers and online only? Order answers beginning for letters.
Again, with having some flexibility, I think it's looking at some of the data we received show the amount of targets within that first hour at 8 a.m. So having a flexibility, and again, with the autonomy of the specific school district, there's ways to do that. So again, if we started a day that's more amenable, where maybe families have to get to work at a certain time or not, we could have that flexibility in the schedule so that kids are getting here when they're going to be ready to go and logging into their system or listening to a teacher or getting that information. So that flexibility is key to modifying what current data shows or what issues are so that they can be successful. In addition to that, again, providing other avenues for learning. Again, if that could look like getting on the computer or having support, having someone there, those are different ways ALA could enhance itself. Again, I think the ultimate goal is to see what's successful for each individual student. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but I know that there needs to be guidelines and framework in place so that all of our students are successful. Getting that feedback from stakeholders, students, and parents about the time it starts and the time it ends, or what things need to be available for them to be successful is key. And so identifying those first to make those decisions will be the steps to take to kind of address the situation.
Mind repeating the question one more time?
How would you revamp the ALA school day to ensure teachers are actively leading lessons? Students learning on computers / online only.
So the first thing I would do is look at the schedule and see how it's currently set. Get input from the staff that is currently there, of what is working, what is not working. Get input from the parents, what's working, what's not working. Get input from the students, what's working, what's not working. Then from there, figure out whether it's scheduling, is it we need more in-person classes, so it's actually looking to see what our teachers are certified in, that maybe we offer more in-person classes. And then we offer some virtual, providing, as I mentioned earlier, an option of choices. Not having, as he mentioned, one size fits all. So maybe offering some in-person, which strictly without the computer, it's direct instruction, or offering some that are virtual with a combination of the teacher, depending on what the teachers are certified to support, based on the input from the students, because the students is what's important, based on the input from the parents or the community, as well as the teachers, to see what is working, what's not. I cannot tell you one is going to be better than the other, but we do need to get away from just solely instruction on a computer, because the in-person instruction is very important as well. So there has to be balance between the two. And that's why it's important to have a variety of options to offer kids. Some kids prefer the virtual strictly. Some kids prefer the combination of the both. So that's why that's important.
I think you can appreciate that all of us are kind of aligned in thinking that we need to look at the schedule that exists within the system. When it is core instruction happening, this core instruction should be happening regardless of whether there's a or not. Students need computers where they're learning and understanding on computers. The other piece that I think is really important to address is that online learning is very difficult for students. It's really hard to engage in school when you're primarily in front of a computer. And so I think it's really important as sort of just how we can create problem-based learning, extending opportunities for students to be able to interact with teachers in a meaningful way that helps anchor their thinking and learning that they're doing in the classroom, and also give an opportunity to structure environment.
Our next question comes from Facebook. The order to answer this is Colette Sadio Begay.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna. Apologies. I'm gonna paraphrase this. I appreciate all the comments that have come through on Facebook. Send those in. So the question is, how would you hold staff accountable who have been consistently ineffective in their roles, but have had a lack of top supervision to hold that accountability?
Thank you for that question. The first thing you have to do is obviously follow the HR policy. You make sure you follow the policy that you document in a right way. What I need is get that information from wherever the issue is happening. For example, if it's a parent reading a concern, investigate that concern following the HR policies. Once you investigate that concern, make sure you document it. If there needs to be a performance plan put in place to address the issue, put a performance plan in place to address the issue. And then make sure you're documenting along the way. At the same time, if it's a person that's not holding that person accountable, both parties have to be addressed. And so that's where the first question that brought up about leadership style and micromanaging. Sometimes when you have to come in, you have to address if they're not being supervised appropriately, you have to put things in place to help the supervisor supervise and make sure that we're following the policies and procedures that are in place, making sure we're documenting everything, making sure we're holding people accountable. And sometimes it's not a pretty thing. It's a hard thing to do, but we have to hold people accountable and we have to be consistent, and it has to be consistent at every side. So if one place is not doing it, and the other is, that's where it's hard to hold people accountable, because you see, well, they're getting away from it. So we need to consistently do that, but following the HR policies and documenting is the best way to do it. And having those conversations, because sometimes people don't realize what they're doing. So it starts with a conversation and then it starts documenting from there.
Yeah, I think that the due diligence process is something that finances look at and evaluate. As you know, also think it's important to use companies that do have systems for being able to do that. You have a lack of supervision, then we need to have conversations with advisors and teams about what will be expected in the district level supervision looks like, sounds like. Just in the way that we do when we work with learners at all ages, we set up those expectations for people, and then you have people accountable for them. But the other piece, I think that's really important. Most people don't work because they want to, right? They work because they have to, and so we have to find a good fit for people where they belong. And I think motivational interview for this particular individual would be a good way of understanding it's why are they trying to operate in this role, and how can we leverage those questions within that individual towards position and the expectation that we have as a district, or towards looking at opportunities in different parts of the organization that may be served them better, or coaching them into another field that supports their needs better. Because we do have a responsibility not just to our students, but to our staff, and making sure that we're taking care of.
Thank you, those watching on Facebook. Again, I think addressing this system and making sure that expectations are in place. Once they know what the expectations are, they can address, what they're doing, what they're not doing well, but also identifying ways that they can be successful. Making sure we have systems in place for them to be successful. If it's a classroom teacher, do we have a instructional coach to help model for them? Is a principal willing to do that as well? Showing that support before any administrative action is taken is very vital to keeping our staff and the culture of the school very successful and positive. So making sure those are in place would be the number one thing to address that first. And then secondly, making sure it's something versus competency or will or effort. Is it something that they don't know how to do, or is it something that they're not willing to do? I think going through those different things and it talks about these things in the four areas of leadership with the researcher named Cookie. So he talks about these things as far as talking about effort and competency. We have to address, are those things that we can help support, or is it something that the employee is struggling through? And again, we should provide avenues before any administrative action is taken, providing coaching and support. And again, that process should not happen instantly. It should happen over time. Again, it's a 3-month process to see if they're making gains or not. And then again, having those tough conversations with employees who are not seeing an actual risk.
Thank you. The next question comes from our survey, and the order for the responses will be Studio, okay, Corlett. Explain your experience with charter school reporting and any experience you have being under a corrective action plan. What actions did you or would you take to mitigate the findings, and who would you involve?
With the Foster Family Tribe to operate a charter high school, that charter school has not been corrective action. So steps that I would take are looking at the training and the development of the teachers who are currently serving students, to make sure that we're addressing the competency of those staff members and supporting them. Looking at leveraging adjustments to the school environment to create a system that's more supportive of the student needs. Right, we have attendance issues that are related to scheduling, or we have issues with home life that we need to address to be more supportive of our students to help them be available to the learning process. And then, of course, leveraging the relationship with charter board members across the state to help understand and paint a picture of what is actually happening at the school, rather than just the statistical representation that tends to be the only picture that gets painted.
So again, working with corrective action in any organization or situation, there are many areas on what needs to be identified. First, the goals and objectives. If those goals are not being met, there's usually accountability that needs to happen at the school level. Part of that could be identifying what needs are there, if it's a specific issue with instruction or curriculum, or if it's something on attendance. Addressing those needs is, again, it requires a lot of stakeholder feedback. With accreditation through Cognia, there are different guidelines that you would need to follow if you're in a corrective action. So making sure that those plans are met with various stakeholders is going to be the ultimate goal and moving forward and how to address those. Situations call for where they need to get parent input on a situation because there's a lack of parent engagement, or if there's administrative issues that are occurring in a school site, a lot of that corrective action could be taken with working through issues and problems, but making sure that the staff is involved to address those. So again, the state has several items in place to make sure that those are met through, you know, the root cause analysis, the comprehensive needs assessment where different stakeholders are asked for feedback, and then making sure that those are taken into consideration so that you're not getting into corrective action. So those are some of the routes that are available to take so that those are being limited and not impacting this.
That question. My history with the charter schools is that I have been involved in the charter schools when I was actually doing something. Charter schools, they look at a variety of things. A couple of things that they look at for accountability is financial piece, as well as the academic piece, as well as the other support pieces. There's 3 areas in the dashboard that you can actually go on the charter board website, and you can see where the districts lie, whether it's red, green, or yellow. And the school district wants to be, and obviously in agreement, like stuff like. And you want to make sure you can hold accountability, and that means making sure your finances are correct, and you're reporting them correctly, all those different things. I have had the experience of going through both as a principal and as an acting superintendent, those sit for. As a principal, I went through an appeal process to keep the high school open back in 2014. And you have to go through showing those different accountability pieces. What system you have in place for academics? What system you have in place for finances? What system you have in place to come through and audit every single standard? What I will do is bring all the different people from the district level as well as the school site that is involved in the charter together so they can help get those different pieces of documentation in place. And then lastly, I was involved with it with the acting superintendent. We had a financial piece. We were red in the financial. It was because of the reporting. So you have to partner with the correct people. I had to partner with the government side for finances, and they had to look at how they were reporting our finances because it didn't align with how the charter did it. So they started correcting that so we would move into the green. But it's actually getting those people together to meet and having them collaborate to something.
I think we're going to take questions from the audience. We'll probably continue to see a lot of people interested in the audience as we continue comments, questions.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tosh, and my 6-year-old goes to kindergarten here, and my 3-year-old goes to school here. So, my concerns as a parent, why I also like to just comment that I really like that there is a comment made about we're at a state of urgency, that we are in crisis. That's what I think. Some of the recent numbers with HHS show that the life expectancy in the community is now 47. We are somewhere around 40% living with type 2 diabetes. And we all know these are all symptoms of a loss of culture, lifeway, disconnection from land, which I think is certainly connected to the social curriculum that some of you have spoke to, which I really support. I think that's great. So I would like to also just express my concern as well and encouragement for bringing in our original life seamlessly, not just in one class or 1 hour, because as we know from evidence from generations before us, it's recent scientific evidence coming to show that the continuation of cultural lifeways also is an an outcome of that is spiritual, physical, mental, emotional health. We see more participation in community. We see more success in performance and academics, as well as increased cultural evolution, continued cultural evolution. And I think it's also important that we show that with employment, correct me if I'm wrong, HR, but tribal members currently are the lowest in the community. I believe that might be so, and there might be other native and we employ most non-native. I always think that there needs to be an emphasis on how do we teach our children to run our own community. And of course, academics is a big part of that component to it. And the component is our healing. It's often we all in high school and posh, and understanding that there is also that has to be at the center as well. And healing has to really be centered. So my question, thanks for giving me the time to correct that. It's very important. My question to all of you, two-part question, is that what's your interest in leaving your current job in school and community to come to Salt River? And if you can emphasize, tell us a little bit more about your knowledge of our original life ways, pre-colonial life ways is I'm not going to offer them. I should be much. Thank you.
Order of responses, the gate for that person.
Again, just to address the first part of the question, I think again, the opportunity to grow in our own careers is why I'm looking at the position. And I think it's a next step for me. Again, I was able to complete my doctorate and have all the experience except this last position. And so it's one of the things I look forward to at some point in my life. And I have explored this opportunity before and look forward to kind of just addressing it because it's going to help me grow as a person, but also have the most impact over Indigenous students. Again, it's not just one community, but that information learned and understood is going to help me be successful in the rest of it. And to the other part of your question, again, part of my research was looking at what ways Navajo life or culture impacted their learning. And again, I think that could be applicable to other tribes, other Indigenous tribes as well. Again, with the cultural norms might not be the same, but there are teachings that we all kind of have that are along the same lines. And I think that has guided me. Again, I talked a little bit about walking in two worlds and being successful in both, but really having that identity for me when I was out in school to be successful, when I was the only Indigenous person on campus, that has really helped shape me. But it wasn't a barrier of any sort. It was more of a welcoming where individuals would come to me and ask me and want to know more about it so that they were more self-aware. So to me, that's been one of the missions that I had to be more successful throughout my life, but making sure that I account for both and being successful in both is very important to me, what I would like to emulate for the students of this community as well.
Thank you for the question. To answer the first part of the question, I was actually at Salt River for 10 years before leaving to go to Fort McDowell. I miss being here. I love the community. I love the kids. I love the families. That's the reason I'm coming back. It's not that I'm unhappy where I'm at, but this is where I belong. I shared earlier with staff that the reason I came to apply back for the position is my 21-year-old daughter that lives at home. I used to come home all the time talking about my job. She'd say, so how worked it? When I worked at Salt River, I came home talking about all kinds of things that I loved. I come home now, it's just work. My love is not the same. And so it was an opportunity to come back to what I love with my passion. Now, moving on to the next question is pathways. I currently oversee the culture department at Fort McDowell. I also was involved in a variety of things when I was here for the 10 years, and I understand the identity, and I understand the importance of embedding the culture, the spirituality, a variety of things, because that's part of the healing process. Last year and a half, I've overseen the culture department, which I shared in earlier with the teachers, has kind of woken me up. I think I took that for granted when I worked here the first 10 years. I understood it, but didn't really understand. Haven't dove into it with the youth, doing a culture week, building a kitchen, learning how they do ribbon skirts, learning all the different aspects of what they go through and understanding it is about their identity and I realized the importance of it and how it needs to be embedded and not a standalone. And so that is the avenue I would take once I've learned that piece, how to embed it within the regular class. And so it's a part of it.
Time.
Thank you for your question, and I really appreciate the course that you shared. And acknowledging that having strong cultural identity is a social capital. I think that's something that often gets ignored in school settings. And to your point, your question, why Salt River, why not my current position? For me, it's not a question of wanting to do Fossil. What I want to do is be in a place that's ready to enact the type of social change I think is necessary. Now, that's the motivation for coming here, as I see how well developed Salt River schools and Salt River tribe is, and they're implementing the language and culture. And I want to be where we're ready to make the social change that we need to make for our communities.
Questions from Facebook? Yes. You can go to the audience.
Go to the audience.
Thank you for your patience.
Good to see you all. Yeah. I have a lot of questions, but I think I'll just stick to two or three. So tonight I've been hearing speaking and mention of non-traditional ideas when it comes to the education system. And when I say critiquing, I've been hearing a lot of critiquing of the current US education system, which I agree with. But I want to know more about these traditional ideas and how they will look like in practice, and how will education sovereignty be incorporated and evaluated whether or not it's effective.
In order for the response for that, Sonia.
Thank you for the question. So putting your question in perspective is, it goes back to the social emotional, looking at kids differently. They're not data, they're not a number, they're a person. And it goes to the cultural identity, which was the previous question, putting it all together and having kids should realize what their identity is. And making them recognize that goes through lessons in the schools, whether it's through culture, whether it's through classroom, embracing their identity, whatever that identity might be, and embracing the cultural pieces of it, the inner pieces of it, and using that, because once the kid identifies with who they are, it puts them on a pathway to learn. And that goes back to the safe learning environment. I can't honestly tell you what exactly that looks like, because we would have to sit down with the school and plan that out. So I want to be honest about that. But it actually could be a vision that is put in place. Because I think there are lessons out there, there's curriculum out there that actually helps students recognize their identity. And some of them are very simple things that we can start with, just gestures and different things that we're doing, all the way to actually lessons, because I think kids at a very young age can identify with who they are, whatever that might be. And then they can grow from that identity as they get older and older, kind of putting their pathway to this question, whether it's spiritually, mentally, but putting all those pieces along the way. And it could start as simple as one thing that I've done where I am right now, currently at Fort McDowell, we started using tiles. And we have Fort McDowell stoles when they graduate. That's a start to identity. It's a check mark, but it's a start.
Time.
Right.
I appreciate that question. I understand entirely where we're coming from, right? We want to believe in social justice and believe in educational reform. What does that actually look like in practice? I think that's a great question. The California Conference on Equity and Justice, Teachers for Local Justice, Unbound Education they all have models that we can use to implement in the classroom. We're talking about how do we build a relationship between, how do we build a relationship between teacher and teacher, from the school side to the district level, to be able to facilitate conversation, holding restorative justice circles in the classroom as part of the way to start the day, to help teachers get extended and read where students are coming in, what they're coming in with for the day, so that we can reach out and apply our resources that we need to support that person, support the behavior happens in the classroom, so that when that student gets what he needs, he can come back into the classroom and be ready to learn for us. And I think the biggest way to measure what that looks like is you will eventually see academic growth when students are academically ready, but you're also going to have to measure students against the problems. That's something that we use in special education with the IEPs and the plans. Is what is your baseline for what is normal for your behavior for the academics, and then how do we measure the growth for every quarter, every semester, to be able to demonstrate that you're moving closer towards academic readiness. And it's a longer game, but it's one that's necessary if we're going to support our students at a baseline level to make sure that we get there with the academic achievement.
Thank you. Next question. Facebook.
I think we have.
Oh, sorry.
Again, thanks for your question. I think it's very important. The great thing about traffic control routes of schools, that if they choose that route, they have a lot of autonomy to make that happen. I've worked at traffic control schools where they have the autonomy to create curriculums of their own that assess their skills. If that route is taken, the limit could be endless of what that looks like. Until you get there, there's certain parameters you have to put in place. So again, with what that reform looks like at some of the schools that I am currently working with, is we take the classroom outside of the classroom and put it into our traditional. We have these Hogan, which is the traditional house of the Navajo. We have teachings there. We have guest speakers who come there. We have elders who come there. We have opportunities for the principal to have muffins with my son, which is for mother, and then cookies with Che, which is for grandpa. So those opportunities allow us to take education out of the classroom and put it into traditional home, so that they see that that's still an okay way of learning, but it's also important, and that cultural piece is highlighted within that. So offering those different areas of where the education is happening is vital. And then also, again, having that community engagement and the ways to kind of hold that true with what they're doing outside of the classroom after school is very important. Again, developing apps to make sure that they're getting cultural in a technology way as another way for them to limit that barrier of them not seeing it just in, an hour a day or an hour a week, but they have it when they get home to play on those games and to use those resources. So those are additional ways to kind of think outside the box.
Next question on Facebook.
Thank you. This is from one of our tribal leaders. Proficiency is very important to securing our funding. Have any of you worked in a school that received a failing grade from your governing body? And how did that get resolved?
To answer is signing up the game.
I personally have not worked in a school that has received a failing grade, but I've supported schools through local education agencies that I partnered with as the education director, who have been in corrected plans or in that position of receiving failing grades. And so, yes, I understand the value of proficiency and the value of partnerships that support those school sites with the struggling areas, right? Sometimes we have to reach out and leverage partner relationships with professional development companies, with the state and federal leadership that remain to support our schools and our communities. And then we also have to take a look at our teaching staff, the competencies that are available to them, the training and the workshops that are available to them, and have a really honest conversation with our community members about what is happening in our schools and the directions that they're moving in, so that the community can help us create ideas to intervene in that process. I think a lot of time when it comes to looking at schools that are struggling, we look for private solutions, and sometimes the answer is in the room and bringing that issue to our community as well.
I have also not been a part of a failing school, but I think there have been magnets of schools within our school that have been needing corrective action. So again, with the example I had, we have had a FACE program we needed to make corrective action, but it was just very minute details that needed to be corrected where we just needed an additional staff member. But the reason that they were in that corrective action and there was no action taken for the past 2 years from a prior administration. So just knowing what those corrective action steps are and what to address is very important because it could be as simply as hiring somebody to get someone in the classroom so that those ratios are met. So that's one instance where corrective action. I've been a part of accreditation and Cognia, where we're making sure that our schools are accredited and making sure that we have all the people in place, our curriculums are aligned, we have the right resources and people, our fiscal budgets are aligned and accurate. In my current position as well, we have multiple stages of accountability. We're making sure that we're addressing situations with fiscal budgets at the school sites, but also with the different grants that intertwine and grade how we're paying our individuals and working with consultants, gathering professional development. So those are instances where we've worked with budgets specifically to make sure that we don't get into those corrective action sites and other obstacles that may occur.
Thank you for the question. I was at Salt River School when I first started here as a principal. It was a letter D school. When I came in as a principal, we had to put a corrective action plan in place. What that meant is we had to look at our data, see where we were failing, and make changes to the different teachers, to the curriculum, to the instruction. And we had to document it. We created a data board where we tracked every kid. We had to look to see where proficiency was happening and where there were pockets that we had to address. We had to bring in intervention and training for staff to address that intervention, so those pockets could be addressed. Then from there, we had to submit that plan to the state or ADE to share with them and as well as the charter what we were doing. At that point, we won the appeal because we showed proficiency. Proficiency looks different, and that's what everybody needs to be clear on. Proficiency looks different depending on what type of school you are. Currently, ALA is an alternative school. Its grading system is different than a regular high school. And so based on that grading system, it's a point system. It's based on a variety of factors. Proficiency is a piece of it. The other pieces are whether you take the ASVAB tests, whether you have internships, a variety of other factors you can get points. That's why currently ALA is at a B, because it has a variety of other ways to get proficiency. The elementary is a BIE and it has different standards. So it's making sure that we understand what the standards are and what to do.
Any questions? How will you work with teachers and staff to improve student outcome? Answer the order of the gate for that or something.
Thanks for that question. Again, I think that's the root of everything that we're tonight and explain. And I think there's multiple ways to do it. Again, I talked about expectations and kind of what those are for teachers, making sure that they're have the right tool to be successful in the classroom, providing coaches and opportunities for them to be successful that help teachers. And again, just looking at class sizes, class ratios, is there individuals with IEPs, individualized education plans? Are they special needs? Are they gifted? And making sure that we're really breaking down that education. Again, I'm a proponent of no one size fits all approach to education. That's going to look different. That's going to be different. And our teachers need to be capable of modifying their ways that they teach in their classroom so that they're highlighting the students who are successful and need more, and also working with those who are at the bottom tier who need that additional help and are supportive in the classroom. So that looks different in multiple ways, but making sure that those are first in place for teachers to be successful, because ultimately the students In addition to that, accountability with our administrators, identifying what those supports are in those classrooms as well is very important. So our administrators would need to be in the classrooms and be just as active and involved. And then once that feedback gets back to the district level, whether it's the school board or the superintendent or the directors of those programs, making sure that we're aware of those systems so that we can look at how budgeting is going to impact that so we can provide the resources for our students.
Thank you for that question. It comes down to a variety of elements that come together as one. So data is one piece, curriculum is one piece, instruction is another piece, and people is the other. So people, it involves professional development to address issues. But as I shared with the board in our earlier interviews, I would propose that we do an instructional notebook. Currently, right now, when we get data, just as data. We say, this kid's not performing, that kid's not performing. We don't look at the whole picture. We need to look at all pieces that play into it. So looking at the data and creating an instructional notebook that all staff, and I mean all staff, all the way from instructional specialists all the way down, they see all the different aspects to include the data, including observation, feedback from our peers, because we can learn from our peers, including feedback from our administrators or our directors, and putting that all to be very reflective, because we learn best by reflective practices. And then moving forward to looking at our instruction. Does our instruction align with our curriculum? And making sure all those things align. Then what professional development do we need to put those things in place? And one of those things that we would look at is the tests. They test information. Sometimes it's rote, sometimes it's application, sometimes it's analytical. We need to be able to prepare our students to take those kind of tests, to be able to answer those kind of questions in an instructional manner. So understanding those analytical questions, understanding those application questions. They need to be prepared when they're going to take tests, whether we like the test or not. I have to understand how to take it.
The biggest pieces I think when it comes to curriculum instruction that are almost relevant to the outcomes and what I see happening in schools where we struggle most is how functional are our professional learning communities? How well do they serve that teachers be able to generate outcomes with students? And then the other piece is the small group instruction, right? How much fidelity do we bring to small group instruction? When we break students into different skill and abilities, we teach a lot of the instruction that they need to be able to be successful. And every time I do school site visits, every time I'm in the classroom, these are the two things that I see being the biggest area of concern with teachers and being able to create the outcomes that they need for their students. But the other thing that I think is really important is to be able to measure growth for students. Students need to understand their position within their learning and their growth with the standards and those types of things. And being able to figure out ways in which they're growing to help build their self-esteem and move them towards those outcomes. Some of our students are going to be able to thrive with the small group instruction and the professional learning community that helps the teachers to be effective in the classroom. And some of them are going to need to be able to see themselves successful on growth based on just who they are as an individual. Audience question? Hello.
Oh, geez. I don't know how she felt. Sorry. Hi, my name is Kim Manuel, and I'm a parent and community member, or grandparent. I'm currently raising 6 grandkids. So I have 2 at ECDC and 1 at elementary, and one actually in Mesa Public School, which is Westwood High School. And I'm hoping that I have a 4th grader, and I'm hoping by the time he reaches 7th grade, you guys will have this high school open. That's my next project, is to get this high school open again. Because I had 3 kids, older kids that came to this high school. Miss Corlett, I was there. And this high school is wonderful. I loved it and everything. But anyways, my question is because I have 2 kids at ECDC and I have the 1 at elementary. My question to you is that, what are you going to do for the staff to make them want to come to work? Because a happy employee is a productive employee. So for me, And I'm very grateful for ECEC for taking the two of my two grandkids that I have to take care of. And I'm very grateful for them because I work full-time also, and so does my husband. And I'm very grateful for them. And there are problems there. There were, but now hopefully it'll get better. But I feel that the staff that has to deal with anyone in the school system, they need to be recognized. They need to feel like they want to come to work. Because if you have an employee that has a bad morning, guess what happens? The kids have a bad morning, okay? I want the teachers to feel that they are happy when they come to work to teach my grandchildren, to move them forward, to have them succeed. So I threw a couple of suggestions, you know, birthday cake for the birthdays in May or so forth, soda machine. I found drink, you know, like the one they have at Circle K, you know, stuff like that. What, as you guys, because I know all these questions you were talking about is all the, you know, financial, all this charge stuff. But you need to focus on the kids and the teachers, kids and teachers. That's my #1 priority. So I want, as you as a superintendent, I want to know what you're going to do for the staff to make them feel like a happy employee is a productive employee. Thank you.
Response worker is Corvette. Rosario Begay.
Thanks for the question. And you're right, it's about kids and families, and that's why we're all here. And the main thing about staff is they have to feel appreciated, because like you said, a happy worker is a productive worker. And there are ways to be productive, to appreciate them. It could go very simple to having appreciation events once a month. In the past, there's been coffee trucks, there's been a variety of things that staff have been appreciated for. There's also been awards given to the staff for the month. There's a variety of ways that staff can be appreciated and thanked. I think sometimes they get lost in the trenches because they're in the trenches. And as a leader, it's my job to be in the trenches with them, because that's also a way of showing them appreciation. I'm here to be with you side by side doing it and not putting it on them. That sometimes our actions are another way of appreciating. Sometimes it's not just words. Sometimes it's events. I think there's a variety of things that can show people that you appreciate the hard work they put in, because being an educator is not easy. And it's hard, especially when you have life going on and then you come to work and you're working with kids all day. So you have to be appreciated. And if that means we come and help, if that means district office comes in and helps in the building for the day, there's a variety of ways. It could be, like I said, the trucks. You can do events to show appreciation. There's lots of those different things, but I think there's nothing better than showing it by modeling it as a leader, setting it within that building, and helping out.
Thank you, Ms. Merrill. That's actually one of the core philosophies about education is how we support teachers and students. You cannot appreciate someone that you do not know, right? Otherwise, it's just another pizza day, and teachers are tired of pizza day, as delicious as pizza is. But to that point, right, we have to know and understand what our teachers are. We have to know what challenges they face on a daily basis. We have to be able to have community building circles with them, to be able to allow them to feel like they can even be honest with us about what they're struggling with. Because when you're in a high level leadership position, people are always going to be honest with you about what they're struggling with. It's actually against that doesn't support what it is that they're coming to me to ask for. I think the other piece about that too, and leaning on restorative justice mindset here is having the building the community with us. Teachers are hopefully able to support each other, right? And seeing that we check in with a student to be able to understand what their needs are during the day. Having a leader on site who's checking in with what they're bringing in with them today and how we can anticipate the needs of our teaching staff so that we're better supporting the student. I think all of those systems are really supported to be able to show them that we genuinely care about them because they are, because we work with them on a regular basis.
Yeah, staff retention is one of the most important things to keep in mind as an administrator. I think it's, there's different ways to show that. One of the things that I currently do with administrators is, usually at the beginning of the year, I find out what things they like and so that candy, and I don't let them know what I'm doing with that information. And then come, April, when they're bogged down on testing, I just magically show up with the one that they identified back in August. And it's just a pick me up. No words exchanged, but that's just a quick win for me and a quick win for them, and they get through the day. But those are different strategies that I kind of use. We also recognize Teacher of the Years at each of our sites, and then also with the classified staff, so a custodian or food worker or transportation member. But recognizing them is just a show of impact on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the focus of having students kind of being led up. In addition to that, we usually have a newsletter that we have going on a bi-weekly basis where we're highlighting students with their pictures on different activities they're doing, if they're on a robotics trip or a football game, baseball game, or they presented at CTE, they won a competition. We highlight those students in there. We have our staff's birthdays per month, so everyone knows everyone's birthday. Keep that hidden, check with HR, but those are some of the things we do to, express our appreciation for the teachers who are on the ground doing everything. And I think that's the same way we address our administrators as well. But it's been a huge success, and then students get to kind of refer back to their letters as well to show their success.
Anything else?
My name is Jacob Butler. I had a question. You guys talked about languages and the influences of culture. We have a lot of community members. That's in the kids district. We see not all of the teachers from the community, and the ones that are from the community, wants to bridge to level that's cool. And you guys talked about how do you make the schools teachers want to be. They are happy in their jobs. But understanding, I'm sure some guys. A lot of the parents, the community members aren't too happy with non-tribal migrants teaching the language. Some of them are, but some of them aren't. And so how do you bridge that gap? How do you bring a better understanding to community members and also encourage the teachers to go outside their comfort zone to do things that they're contractually obligated to do? It's practice that and integrate that into all aspects of their educational practices of school. And so how do you bridge that gap and bring families and teachers together so they're supported to do those things that perhaps and do it in a good way that they're received well by the families?
Order is starting of the game. I think language, the teaching of language is one of those things that can be very sensitive conversation in tribal communities. I think that in my experience as the education director for Bayaki, that's one of those areas where you have some people who really want to protect the language. Some people see that as gatekeeping, and other people really want to just build as much language as we can so that we can hear it in our communities, because we don't hear it in our community. And so one of the ways that I think we can address that, and also going back to the question of how we support teachers, one of my experiences as an educator was being lumped into professional development with folks when it didn't speak to what I was doing as a special education teacher.
and worry about, what can I do with this time? So I think we need to develop professional development for teachers and not use that once as a whole model for them, to be able to give them greater autonomy and choice so that they can choose the pathway that makes sense for them and that motivates them and keeps them interested. Language can be one of those pieces, but I also think we need to build capacity around language for teachers to be able to access it more regularly in the classroom. I talked previously about creating a curriculum process that looks at the standards that teachers are interacting with every day and finding the repeat question life is that attached to that so that teachers can something you say, we're learning about this in classroom today. It's very textbooks. But there's something from language, culture, and history that belongs to the often people that we can bring into the classroom every day and just building capacity for teachers to be able to do that. Also think it's really important that they can develop pathways for teachers to become fluent in language, so that we can really focus on the emerging piece that we see in time out vision.
Yeah, thanks for that question. There's different experiences that I have had again with the Navajo language. And again, we have ours completely written, there's textbooks out there, and we have teaching that. How that's addressed, again, I think that's just a preference. But to be respectful of, the language here would be something that I would ask and get feedback from. Again, if that's a preference that a tribal member was teaching that, I would definitely take that into consideration. I think those who are fluent in the language and are able to teach it should be the ones teaching that and taking that on. Again, I gave you an example of having a different classroom outside of the classroom where if it's a tribal location or somewhere else where those teachings can continue and providing the opportunity for that to happen is important. Because one, that builds not only connections with the language, but also within the communities as well. So that's kind of one area that I would look at as, what is the primary focus of that? But I think it's relying on those who are, fluent in that language to be the ones that kind of lead that. The other part of that is the technology component. I talked about creating an app. Right now, there's multiple apps for the Navajo language where you can go on and learn vocabulary. But it does one thing that it limits in one area where it doesn't speak on the conversational piece. So again, that conversation language that should be happening, that oral tradition, is not being passed down that way and it's being learned a different way. So it's addressing those different needs with those unique challenges we have with our youth today. But bridging those gaps is one of the areas that we do with technology at that focus, but also relying on the elders and those who are fluent to lead that motion.
Thank you for that question. Currently at Fort McDowell, I oversee the culture department as part of my education director job. That has seen my eyes to the questions that you're asking, because there's a variety of dialects that go on. There's a variety of different versions of what it looks like and different aspects. Some people don't want the language taught in the outside schools. Some people want it inside the schools. There's different views on different things. I think that's where we have to come together with elders as well as the people in the community to get input, to have them buy in, to get their feedback to building that pathway. And I also agree with you about the statement that you write when you work for Salt River. You have to embrace the culture. You have to embrace the language and learn the language. And I think we need to offer professional opportunities at everybody's level. Teachers are like kids. We all learn differently. And I will tell you, some of the languages that are harder to learn than others. I'm witnessing that myself now with the Yavapai language. It's harder to learn. And so we have to put those supports in place for our teachers that are not native, as well as from other communities, and even within the community that don't know the language, to give supports in place for them to learn it and learn it at baby steps, and then infuse it into the classroom, into their teaching, embedding it. But we have to start with having a conversation with the community, because we have to do it together.
Thank you. Remaining audience questions? We're going to do the act question, and after this, we're going to do quick lightning round, 30 seconds after this.
I'll try to make this fast. Another paper question. I'm here today to talk about criticism and feedback. But I would like to know more about accountability, both meetings and mistakes. So what are some mistakes that you think professionally, where did you learn from them, and how do you ensure that you don't make those mistakes.
Maybe sentence the gate for that.
And in the administrative world, there's various instances where you're pulled multiple different ways, where you have to complete evaluations, you have grants to make sure that they're complete. You have to meet with schools, you have different director meetings. So again, there's multiple things going on and you have to prioritize that. Again, I spoke to a company who's written a book and it talks about the leadership and it talks about the whirlwind. Whirlwind is 80% of what we do and 20% we try to focus on, but that whirlwind is where we get kind of intertwined with everything we're dealing with. I think I've had some great learning experiences, whether it's dealing with human resources, accountability, working with different staff, how to address different staff. And in all those instances, I made myself a better leader, but also a better listener within that process as well. So when I've had to work with staff and identify what the needs are, I make sure that I listen throughout their whole conversation before I butt in. And that is meaningful for them because I'm restating what they're saying and making sure that we're looking for a solution to what they're wanting to be addressed. So part of those is just, that progression of myself as a professional, but there's multiple instances where I've had to take a step back and listen to someone who knew more information about a specific content area or a specific skill or strategy they were trying to teach. But being open to that and mindful of that is helping to be a better and, a more understanding person. And I think that's been one of the things that I value the most in my entire career as well.
Thank you for that question. Criticism, I think, is very important because, as you mentioned, we're all human. We all make mistakes. Obviously, I've been in education for I'm going to my 31st year. I've made many mistakes along the way, and I've learned at each level that has made me a stronger leader as I've moved on to the next level. I think the one thing that I reflect on is sometimes I think we can do it all. We can save the world. We can do everything, and then we end up not doing every little piece very well. Something's got to give. That is one thing I've learned in my time at Salter, my time at some other places, that we need to focus on doing the thing that we need to focus on doing well. When I was here as the acting person, I did a variety of jobs because I was acting in other jobs as well. When I reflect and I look back, there's many things that I didn't do well because I had spread myself so thin. That's one thing I would not do again because I learned that I have to balance those things. And I learned that I have to lay the path that I can achieve and don't lay it bigger than I can achieve. So that was a growth to me, which allowed me to look at balance because I also think one thing we need to grow as, that we all have a work and home life balance. I'm a workaholic. I can just say that very honestly. I love what I do, but sometimes that's not a very good balance for our family. So we have to reflect on those as humans to do that balance as well. So those are two big things that I've learned over my last recent years that I have to balance better.
For me, I think the biggest learning curve has really been about navigating difficult conversations. I'm a peaceful person and on my own, and so I can have had difficulties in the past approaching difficult conversations with people. And what I've seen from that is that situations become bigger than they ought to be, that people become more upset than they need to be, and that we end up having to do a lot of work to prepare harm when we're not willing to step in and have those courageous conversations with people that we work with, and ultimately that impacts the service that we provide. And so getting to a place where not only do I feel competent to have courageous and difficult conversations with team members, but that I actually enjoy that opportunity because I know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel for us as long as we're working together. And then of course, yes, the work-life balance has been something that's been difficult for me to maintain. I'm also a workaholic, and being able to understand that it is important that I take care of myself, that I'm in the gym, that I'm out walking my dogs and doing those things to be able to do credit for my work life as well as my personal life.
Thank you. Okay, our last three questions, lightning round. First one, and the order of the response is Corvette, Rosario, Begay. Lightning number one. How do you plan to get more community members to attend this?
Okay, I think it's about choice. As I shared earlier, it's about having options. So if you provide a lot of options and choices, then you meet the needs of a variety of kids. Right now, we have certain levels, and to me, it's not a choice. We need to offer them choices. Some of the choices may be the outside schools, and that's okay, but then we need to provide support outside. That's what I mean by offering them options of choices. It could be outside schools, but put support there. It could be within our schools, but put supports and make sure we have different options here. I think we open ourselves out to everything and not just focus on the schools right here. We have to allow kids to have those choices.
I think part of that is by providing programs and services that attract students, families to other subjects. The more that we're able to supplement and enrich the programs that we offer at the school, the more likely students and families are to choose our schools. And then I think it's really important that we build ourselves a model for what Indigenous education look like and strengthen that perspective that students and families have about what's on their school environment.
Again, I think stakeholder feedback is important for that, not only from the parents, but the students to see what they want at their school, the athletics, and then having different magnet programs that they can be successful at. I know that within one of the high schools I am at, they can earn a certificate to work at a chip field, but it takes 9 months for them to get that. But that is a big draw for them to take on that opportunity so that they're successful. They have a job in the evenings and it's something that they want, and that school has increased in enrollment. So those are some of the things to look for in increasing student involvement.
Thank you, Ken. And a second lightning question. What is your stance on students who have continuous behavior issues that are beyond the scope of the resources that Salt River Elementary can offer? 30 seconds, and the order is Rosario, Begay, Corvette. This is stance on students who have continuous behavior issues that are beyond the scope of resources of Salt River Elementary School.
I think the involvement in the collaboration of all of the tribal departments that provide wraparound services is important to that we have enough systems in place for communication or collaboration to be able to provide those services. There is not a student in Salt River School that Salt River School can't handle, and I think we need to start to own and believe in the reality of services that we provide.
Again, I think looking at positive behavior and restorative justice as needs within that and within the country. Again, those are different approaches that are punitive, meaning they don't get punished. But you look at different ways to address how you're working with students, identifying what the root problem is. Maybe they just have a title. So looking at those in a different view, but also having different incentives in mind as well too. I think looking at education in that different way is going to help them be successful, and adding the positivity to it and not punitive is very important.
I think it's important to look at a variety of things. The first thing you need to look at is currently Salt River Schools have a discipline matrix in place. That discipline matrix involves interventions and a variety of supports outside the community as well as inside the community. So we need to embrace all those outside community resources that are in the community, as well as embrace the ones that are in the school, and work together collaboratively to address that using that matrix, or fine tune that matrix if that matrix is currently not working. And then look for ways to provide intervention. But I agree with my peer. I don't think there is one thing that Salt River School can't handle.
Okay, the last lightning question. The order is Begay, Corvette, Rosario. Question is, with the recent changes that have taken place by the Biden Harris administration regarding Head Start tribal programs, How will you support ECEC with educating the community about Head Start programs and what the income eligibility changes mean for families?
Yeah, I think it's looking at different approaches on, again, what's available out there, what are different avenues. Again, I talked about, I come from a state that does not have kindergarten or it's an option. So making sure that those data sets that are for education and what they provide to students coming into first grade, really highlighting that and making sure that those resources are still available for our students.
Repeat the question.
With the recent changes that have taken place by the Biden-Harris administration regarding Head Start tribal programs, how will you support ECEC with educating the community about Head Start programs and what the income eligibility changes mean for families?
So the first thing that we would need to do is bring the community and the ECEC and update them on what those policies are and what those different procedures are. Also sharing with the community what resources we can get by using those resources and supports. They have SMART support, which addresses behavior. They have a variety of other resources that can be brought in. So letting those parents know what resources are out there attached to Head Start and early Head Start. And sharing that information based on the data, based on the information that's out there. But the best way to do that is bring the families in or go to the families where they're at and hold different forums with the community.
The community education piece is again, most helping families understand what these changes are going to impact, which students get the access to, and then creating avenues and other routes for families to be able to engage with other local programs that are operated that they could be eligible for, and then of course addressing some of the educational needs that students have through other non-standard, non-Head Start programs that can be offered by the school community resource office and the tribal education department.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank all of you for all of your wonderful questions coming out this evening and staying late. We weren't able to get all the questions either from the survey or online. And so we have asked our candidates to respond to some of these questions. That will be posted on the summer